So let's get busy with doing a little bit of Amazon Web Services, just to give a high-level introduction. Um, Amazon has slowly been sort of defining the startup computing space, and I think they've done so many things right in implementing the web services that they literally may be the most important IT company in the next 10 years. And the reason why I say that is because for folks like me who are active in working with startups, trying to boot startups, trying to help other people boot startups, being partners or owning companies, the notion of Amazon Web Services is the sole enabler that makes little companies possible. So if you look at a Zynga or you look at a Sony, PlayStation Network, or you look at a Airbnb, or you look at a Netflix streaming service, all those are dependent upon Amazon Web Services. And it's scary how much of the Web 2.0 and the app, the mobile app space is dependent upon these kind of prop up clouds. So the first thing you guys need to do tonight is to get yourself a cloud. And the way that you go about doing that, let's get this nice and big, is you go on over to aws.amazon.com, and you go on over there and you go to My Account, and if you don't have an account yet, you want to go ahead and get yourself an account. I believe that I am logged in here, so one move you can make is to and they kind of rework this. I haven't used this from the standpoint of a new user for a while, but here's what you want to do. You want to go over to the menu on the left-hand side. You want to go to Getting Started or the AWS free tier. Now, one of the great things about AWS is they want you to use the service for free for about a year, and then they say, go ahead, build whatever you want to build on a very limited throughput capacity basis, and then hopefully after a year of free usage, you'll know how to use their services and you can begin to do stuff. And that free year has enabled so many people to get involved with Amazon. And let me stress this right now. I think that the college kids are all using technology that's probably about 12 years old. The average college kid, I go behind their shoulder and they're using MySQL, which is a great system, undoubtedly. But I think that MySQL since about 2006 has begun to be relegated to the back seat. And I think Amazon has put some very serious cloud databases out there that need to become the mainstream, for young undergraduates. And I remember using MySQL. I was an Oracle DBA and thinking, okay, this is the future. And the reality was that was probably true. For about 8 years there, MySQL was just indispensable for where the internet was going. But that was a very browser-focused internet, which is great. God bless it. But what's happened is with the advent of these clouds, the MySQL thing is nowhere near as important as the new databases that we have. These NoSQL, very highly resilient databases. And the MySQL architecture just is not, I don't want to say is not relevant, but it's not as potent when you're looking to serve millions of people at the same time. Because frankly, the relational database, as brilliant as it is, it's much more suited to analyzing data sets than it is to just simply responding to traffic requests. So let's do this. Go ahead, get on over to this menu over here, and open this menu, and let's go over to training resources, developers, products, solutions, cloud computing, AWS free tier. Let's go on over there. I'm going to have you guys get that free tier. And let's try to zoom in here as best we can. That's not working for me. I just need to be able to read the screen, and you guys can follow along and you can read your own page. But here's free tier. You go sign up for an AWS account. You've got to put in your credit card. You've got to have a credit card to do this homework. It's not going to cost you anything. If you go along with our instructions, it's not going to cost you anything. If you're not okay with that, just take a 0 on the homework. Sorry. I apologize ahead of time. You'll get a 0 and probably not pass the course. You got to have some kind of money to do college. If you have a credit card and you spend no money on it, that's great. That's all you need to do. But you need to have the ability to at least spend nothing, but you need a credit card to do this. So they won't let you go for it. If that makes you nervous, then just sign up for the next class. Because you got to be able to have a service. You got to be able to face the internet. And you guys got to go through this right here. Got to sign up. It'll cost you 0. So you're going to be signing up for the basic plan. Let's zoom on in there. This is what you're going to make. You're going to get the basic account. Let me say this. I've had a lot of bright students kind of fall in love with Amazon Web Services a little bit too quickly, and they sign up for the free tier, and then they quickly turn on services that are not supported in the free tier. So let me say that here's what it looks like when you start to use it. You have this gigantic array of very cool and compelling services, and this is why Amazon is so popular right now, is because people love the kind of the rich variety of new services that they roll out. I remember speaking with a AWS evangelist at an AWS event in Los Angeles, year 2013, and we said, look, no, 2011, I believe, and we were saying to them, look, you really need to integrate search utility, kind of have a MapReduce brand of search that's happening inside of your cloud. And they said, wow, that sounds like a neat idea. Why don't you let us know how it goes trying to deploy open source search software inside of our cloud? And so we kind of kept in touch with them, but I think that they were already on top of it. They were already launching Cloud Search, which is a search engine that will parse your website and will act kind of like a Google search engine for your textual content in your website. So within a year or two of that face-to-face meeting, they had already rolled out a fairly reliable cloud search. But let me say that I don't believe that cloud search is a part of the free tier that you guys are signing up for. The same thing applies to RDS, which is the Managed Relational Database Service. RDS is the classical MySQL that young students use that is probably less important in the employment marketplace. But your teachers are always a good, solid 12 years behind, That's the classicness is, you have all these gorgeous, PhDs who are teaching something that, is not really in use any longer. There's a lot of great MySQL. Like, for example, Pinterest is a big MySQL user, but I think that, they're probably running thousands of instances of MySQL. And even though that's really wonderful, I wonder if that's really, the best way to do things. Now, they're wizards with MySQL, but hacking MySQL to work with the cloud, frankly, that's for a very hardcore infrastructure engineer to do. And as a developer, such as you guys are, you really don't want to have to employ a lot of hardcore infrastructure engineers, to boot up big clouds. You want to have control over your own cloud so that you can be in control of this company. IT networkers, you can't have Facebooks without these IT networkers, and systems admins. But not everybody is a Facebook. Not everybody can pay, $150,000 for a person to keep a bunch of databases running. It's more realistic to get that kind of expertise involved later in the game. But for the early going, AWS is really a startup machine. And for me, for students, AWS really reflects the realities of studenthood very well too. Now, also, if you're coming from a very, the traditional, server-based web development mindset, you're also expecting to run a Linux instance, so to support your MySQL. And what I guess we're saying right here is this lecture will cover how to never run a server, how to not have a server, how to not be dependent upon running Linux at all, and how to configure your website so that you just focus on your client experience and that you're working data to and from the cloud directly from the browser. That is a very, very radical concept, but let me emphasize here, we're going to talk about JavaScript in the browser today. One of the great things about JavaScript is that at least the JavaScript that you run here inside of Amazon is that you're not going to be required to run a server in order to create your web application. That is a very radical concept, and Amazon, frankly, is emphatic about the use of serverless JavaScript-based services. And let me try to get to their homepage. And sometimes they rework this, so sometimes after I dig in for a couple months, I come out and I realize that they've changed the front page a little bit. But let me emphasize that when you're using JavaScript inside of the AWS cloud, such as you will be doing by the end of these talks, that there won't be a server required. This is a radical break. You know, for web developers to go into a corporation and to build up a series of web applications that don't require system administration, that means that the cost of maintaining the system that you're deploying will be a percentage. You know, will be drastically smaller than if you were to be dependent upon a bunch of Linux instances. You know, you won't need systems administrators. So, you know, I think the advantage of this will become clear later. But let me just say that once, you know, I think enterprise computing, corporate America really proves this model, that there won't be any way back. You know, the actual need for a lot of sysadmin to do web development will disappear. And it's a scary idea, but let me just say this. The networks, the IT pros, they have bigger fish to fry. They have other goals that they need to be setting right now in terms of software-defined networking and new forms of spin-up data centers. You know, they have new concepts for them to chase that there's no need for them to just be slaving over web servers. So let's create the workflow here. Once you have your AWS account, and let's say that you've got that account now, what you want to do is you want to go into your management console and you want to use your credentials to log in there. Now I happen to be logged in already, but what I want you to do is I want you to go over to your security credentials. And what's happening here, you basically need to acquire your access keys, and what you need to do is you have the opportunity to make new access keys at any time. You need to have your access keys in order to operate securely as you transfer data back and forth from Amazon. So what you have is you have your access key, and there are two pieces of information in your key. You get a key ID, and then you have a secret that's going to be included. And when you create a new access key, you're gonna create it right here, and then you're actually going to save it real quickly, and then you only have one chance to save it. And that creates a very secure environment where later, this is the last time your secret key will be available for download. That's the way that it works from here. Now, I already have a key here, so I'm not going to download it for the YouTube. I'm not going to show it to you for the YouTube community. But let me just say that you're going to go ahead and you're going to create it, you're going to download it, and then you're going to have access to that. You can type it in later. Let me give you a little preview. You're going to be referring to that key later as you craft your JavaScript. So just a little review of what we're going to do today. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to set up your web page so that you can use JavaScript to upload a file to your cloud, and your cloud can kind of give you a success message. And we're going to do that right now as a way to get started with Amazon. Now, just to be clear, Amazon has a number of documentation pages here which I'd recommend. And one of them is their lead documentation page where you need to begin with. You need to start at the start. And we're going to be morphing this example. We're going to be practicing this example and walking through it. So the URL for this is going to be available to you when this is finished, just so you can follow along with me. But what we're going to do is we're going to configure your account so you can upload files to your Amazon cloud. And then you can take time later, slowly walk back through this video, and have your own cloud and have your own web app this way. It's a really rewarding process. So there's a few things that we're going to pull together, and let's just follow along this right here. First thing we're going to do is we're going to go to what the system within Amazon is called S3, Scalable Storage Service. And you're going to go over to your management console. So you're going to go My Account, AWS Management Console. The Management Console looks like this. And you realize that there's a number of subdivisions within Amazon. And you can go on down to Storage and Content Delivery where you have S3. Scalable storage in the cloud. It's one of the most core fundamental pieces of AWS. And you guys are going to get to know it real well tonight. So these are a number of what are called buckets. Now basically, when you're doing web development, you need to have a web server. And a web server is just a file system, much like what you use in your personal computer, but a file system that actually responds to HTTP requests for files. That's all a web server is. It's just a Linux box that's sitting out there that responds to one of the 8 core HTTP messages. And one of them is a get and a file request datagram. And so what's interesting about S3 is that S3 is always associated with files, with getting files over the internet. But what's so interesting about S3, and let's go to the properties here, is that the S3 system is entirely based upon HTTP. So when you think about S3, S3 is really a series of web servers that respond to HTTP requests for files. And what Amazon has done is they have rigged S3 so that you can actually get, you can put your static web pages written in JavaScript right there inside of S3. So instead of spending time booting up your own Linux servers, you can actually just write your HTML, your CSS, your JavaScript, and then take that static web page and put it into S3. And then people will be able to access your web page from a publicly accessible address. So this has changed the whole notion of undergraduate application development, education entirely, because now my students can have a web server from the first day of class in a few minutes. So one of the components there is you actually want to create a bucket, and you can walk through those steps. Then once that bucket is created, here's an example of a bucket that is now accessible as a website, because I have, and the permissions are not going to change so much here, but your static website hosting, you're going to enable the website hosting. You're going to talk about the index. That index is going to be the page that everybody sees when they go to the top level of this domain. So for example, this is the website address. And it's going to go straight to this URL. So there's that index right there. And of course, I have something already there at the index. So what you've done is you've said, hi, Amazon, I'd like for you to get a website, and I'd like for you to host that for free, so long as I'm on the free tier. So that's a really cool element for free tier users. So the next series is to go into the permissions, and you're going to go into the CORS configuration. That's cross-origin resource policy. And CORS has been around for a while, but what CORS does is it allows, and you're going to basically copy and paste this series of text right here in the tutorial into your CORS configuration editor. So that's what I've done here. What this does is it allows get put, post, delete, requests over HTTP. Those are 4 core HTTP messages. And so you're going to allow people to access this bucket the same way they would a web server using these allowed method tags. The allowed origin, it can come from anywhere, and it can also specify whatever headers it wishes. So it's a very wide open access for other people to talk to this bucket. And it creates a very open, I wouldn't say insecure, but it's not a very highly governed bucket. It's a wide open bucket. So let me say this. This is kind of like a shopping mall. You guys can always drive your car into the parking lot of a shopping mall. It doesn't mean you can get into the mall, but it does mean that you can get within walking distance of the mall any time of day. This is that kind of access. You can just get within the ballpark of the asset. Okay? So it allows other people to get into the game. So I know I'm moving fast, but guess what I recommend? Once you watch this again, go ahead and just start and pause this video as you fool around with stuff and play with it for hours. Give yourself a whole day. Give yourself 12 hours to do this video. That's fine. It took me hours to get these skills right. So I am quickly speeding you through this. So that is the cores access file, CORS, cross-origin resource. Now what's kind of interesting is that later on, as you talk to your browser, most of these browsers have a cross-origin rule, which says that you can't run a web page that allows a file to come in from outside of its domain. So this is a big piece of the way the websites work right now. Is that the website might load, but it may actually grab data from several different URLs and do somewhat of a mashup of data. And that's good, for the provider of the website. But the browser itself may see that as a security incursion. So what you need to do is you actually need to load a CORS file. And the CORS file actually downloads to the browser. And this CORS file tells your browser, hey, it's cool to get to load a web page that comes from a multitude of origins. And so that CORS is a very kind of old school security that tells the browser, hey, the way this web page is working is okay. Don't stop it from working. Because otherwise you would have to disable the cross-origin restrictions in order to make web pages like this work. So just kind of log that in your brain as we go. Now the next stage in this tutorial is to get a Facebook app ID. And this is something that you may not have ever done before, but I want you going over to developers.facebook.com. And Facebook has a world-class developer environment, which they're constantly improving. And what you want to do is you want to create an account here. And they've changed this a little bit. What I've done is I have my own, you could say add a new app. Once you log in with your own Facebook, you may need to enable your developer account. Definitely do that. But once you add a new app, we're going to get on a website, right? And I have already, you create an app ID. I have already created an app right here, CSU 311. And the first thing they do is they give you a little bit of JavaScript that you're going to grab and that you're going to use this later. But what's critical about this JavaScript is they've provided you with an app ID, which is going to identify your app uniquely on Facebook. And the rest of this is just boilerplate code that Facebook is giving you. But that app ID is something that you're going to keep in mind, because what your Facebook is going to help you do is actually authenticate and prove your identity before you get data from the Amazon cloud. And that is such a cool and liberating concept that you're forcing the user to authenticate through Facebook before they can actually touch your cloud. That saved you maybe 2 or so months of developing a secure authentication mechanism. And that in itself has really enabled the rise of Facebook. But let's just say this, Facebook is probably one of the most ubiquitous computing mechanisms on planet Earth. Most people in the Western civilized world and greater Asia have a Facebook. So it means that just about everybody can prove who they are before accessing your website. It's a very good thing. So, without getting too big picture, go ahead and fill in the blanks here. Now, the URL to your site, you also will have to provide. And you can see that this is S3, US2, that's the region. And that is AmazonAWS.com. That's where that page is. And then I've supplied the URL to my example. And of course, CSU 311, that's my bucket. And you'll probably create a bucket with its own name back when you made your bucket. So you can see that this is, I made this while doing some teaching at Cal State. You can see that the static website, that URL comes from the bucket configuration. So I tell you what, why don't we let you work on some of this right now, and I'll stop this video and I'll make another video that will pick up where we left off, and you can experiment with some of this. Okay? All right, see you next video.